What's going on, everyone? Welcome to the first Ship My Money show of this NBA season. Going to talk the 3 games DraftKings slate tonight. We'll let you know off the top that I pretty much can guarantee this is going to be rusty and not quite as good as usual. Whatever you think, however good you think usual is, today will probably be worse as far as just my ability to flow and talk about basketball because I haven't done it in a long fucking time. But going to get back into it. If you weren't aware, we do have NBA projections up on the site now at Run the Sims. We are still working on these. They're in beta. They're free to use for right now. The link is in the description below. They're free until at least Friday, possibly longer. We'll see how quickly we can iron out the things that we know we need to finish before we start charging for them. But you can use them if you want as part of your process for right now for free. That link, again, is in the description below. I'm going to use them to take a look at tonight's slate on DraftKings. Only 3 games, 3 NBA Cup games. So they do matter. You do get teams, playing their starters a little bit deeper into the game, especially if the game is not competitive. But we have the Hawks taking on the Wizards in the first game, Orlando taking on Philly, Clippers taking on the Lakers. As you can see on the screen right now, the Philadelphia-Orlando game is not showing up in the banner at the top, but it is in the player projections. So we'll still obviously talk about it. I'm going to go game by game and take a look at the player exposures that I would have if the slate started right now. Starting with the Hawks taking on the Wizards. This is the most appealing game of the night in terms of pace, lack of defense, all of the above. The Wizards continue to be a cheat code for opponents. They rank dead last in defensive rating this year. They are 4th in pace. So obviously a team that you want to target against. They are like 9 to 10 point dogs here. But again, this is an NBA Cup game, so point differential does matter as well. You can expect the Hawks to most likely leave their guys out there a bit longer, even if the game is not competitive. On the other side, Atlanta has been a top 10 defense, but they have still played at the 11th fastest pace this year. They have the highest team total on the slate. Washington actually has the highest team total, I believe, at least last I checked, of any of the underdogs on tonight's slate. So obviously an appealing game for DFS. You're going to get a lot of ownership coming in here, and for good reason. There are a lot of good plays really on both sides. As far as injury news goes in this one, I do need to update injury report, but for Washington right now, we have no Trey Johnson. He's out for a while. Marvin Bagley and Keyshawn George are both questionable. This does matter quite a bit. Trey Johnson being out does probably keep Corey Kispert in the starting lineup. That was a move that we saw them make last game, not directly related to Trey Johnson because he wasn't starting anyway. But Kispert shot the lights out in that game. I assume he's just going to stay in the starting lineup for now. But Trey Johnson being out does take, an 18 to 20 minute guy out of their rotation. It solidifies playing time for Cam Whitmore, probably for Champagnie. What you were seeing previously, or actually, we had Middleton out last game as well, so that affected the starting lineup. But what you were seeing previously was that Champagnie was barely in the rotation. Whitmore was in the rotation. Trey Johnson was in the rotation. So now I assume you're just getting everybody kind of stepping up one spot, and Whitmore is firmly in the rotation for something like 17, 18 minutes. Champagnie probably also in the rotation for a similar amount of playing time. If Keyshawn George is out, I would guess that you're getting Kispert in the starting lineup. With Middleton back, I assume Kispert is moving back to the bench. I'd forgotten Middleton missed that last game. But I think you'll still get Whitmore and Champagnie in the rotation. And then Bagley matters for the backup center spot. If Bagley is in, you do have Alex Sarr back. He missed a couple of games last week, but he's back. If Marvin Bagley is out, then Tristan Vukcevic should be the straight backup center to Alex Sarr. You can probably expect them to split 48 minutes. There's no guarantee. I mean, we did see Washington run really small lineups against Toronto in one of the games that Sarr was out, where Vucevic was like 80% owned and I think played like 13 minutes or something like that. So there's no guarantee that Washington doesn't do something weird, but we did see it in the last game with Bagley out that you got exactly 48 minutes from Sarr and Vucevic. I would expect something very similar to that here. More often than not, if Bagley's out. If Bagley is in, Bagley should be the backup to Sarr, and you should get close to 48 minutes from them. If there is some garbage time, that would go to Vukcevic, but Bagley has been the primary backup center ahead of Vukcevic when everybody in the center rotation is active. So those two injuries do matter. On the Atlanta side, we have a Q tag on Luke Kennard. That does matter as far as depth goes. Nobody other than Trae Young, who's been out for a while, relevant, is missing this one for the Hawks. So other than Trae Young, fully healthy team, with the exception of waiting on Luke Kennard's status. As far as the priorities here for the Hawks, 3 guys right now projected for 30+% ownership on DraftKings: Jalen Johnson at 9,900, Nickeil Alexander-Walker at 6,500, and Kristaps Porzingis at 6,800. And Jalen Johnson, I'm not getting much of right now, and it is really scary because he's playing really well. He is good. He's obviously in a great matchup. I think that he's one of those guys where if you want to play Jalen Johnson, by all means, good play. It's not, I'm not looking at Jalen Johnson thinking that there's any particular reason having to do with Jalen Johnson that I wouldn't want to get to him. I do know that right now I'm over the field on Luka for $2,100 more at about half the ownership. So I'm guessing that it has something to do with right now having about a 35% ownership projection to Jalen Johnson and only like 20%, 18 to 20% to Luka. If those were to get closer, I think I would probably start getting a bit more Jalen Johnson, because like obviously he's really good. You are getting that increasing price tag though, so you are getting him, kind of more correctly priced. But 1.44 DraftKings points per minute so far this season, 31% assist percentage, obviously benefiting from Trae Young being out, 25 to 26% usage rate. The offense absolutely just running through Jalen Johnson, and then you get this great matchup against Washington. So clearly he's a really, really good play. If I don't get too much of him, then I'm going to be really scared. And based on recent games, it's probably not going to go well. But it really does matter. Like what are you getting to? I don't think I would want to go into a 3-game slate saying like, well, I'm not going to play much Luka and I'm not going to play much Jalen Johnson, because at that point, where are my raw points coming from? One interesting thing that I have noticed this NBA season, I've been using a new model that I built, and I've been really happy with the types of lineups that it's giving me. One thing that I've noticed is that it has on a lot of slates been prioritizing mid-range, high upside guys a bit more at the expense of your top tier pay up guys like Jokic and like Luka. But tonight it's not doing that. And I think it is for the logical reason of you just don't have as many good mid-range guys. If you have a 7, 8, 9 game slate, then that bucket of mid-range guys that you can get to that can realistically go score 55, 60 fantasy points is obviously a lot bigger. But on a 3-game slate, there's only so many guys that you can get to that have any chance in hell of scoring anything close to Jalen Johnson or Luka. So as a result, it kind of takes a step back, and now it's saying, okay, well, what's the ownership look like on Luka? What's it look like on Jalen Johnson? And I think it's kind of looking at those two and others, but those two in particular as kind of a decision point. So I'm not getting to a ton of Jalen Johnson right now, but certainly think he's a good play. Nickeil Alexander-Walker, 6,500, playing solid minutes here. He's getting 33% ownership. I only have about 18% of him as well. He's fine. I don't love the price tag, but the playing time is good. We have him projected for 33 minutes. So far this season, he has produced 1.03 DraftKings points per minute, so he has been productive. He does have about a 24 to 25% usage rate. That is, higher than, I guess, anticipated, benefiting from Trae Young being out as well. Secondary ball handler, secondary creator, 15.5% assist percentage as well. So he has justified that salary so far, around the fantasy point per minute guy, playing low to mid 30s in minutes at 6,800 or 6,500 rather, in a very good matchup. Perfectly fine to get to. There are just some other guys around him that I think you can look to. But also it probably depends on roster construction as well. If you are taking the approach of going to more Luka, then you probably do have to sacrifice a bit in the mid-range, maybe go from some of these $6,500 guys down to like 4,500 somewhere, compared to if you're playing Jalen Johnson, you can also get to an extra Nickeil Alexander-Walker type guy. Kristaps Porzingis is the one of the main 3 Hawks right now that I am prioritizing. 32% projected ownership. I have 45% at 6,800. He is only center eligible on DraftKings, which sucks, but 3-game slate, it's not as important. Obviously on larger slates, the more centers you have, the higher the opportunity cost, but that's not the case here. You only have the 3 games. So I am getting to him a lot. really nice matchup for him as well. 1.32 DraftKings points per minute through 11 games so far this season for Porzingis. We know the type of player he is when he's on the floor. I said it a couple years ago when he was on Boston. I think he's one of the most underrated players in the NBA. And I think that applies to DFS to some extent as well, because there's just this narrative around Porzingis of him always being hurt and sort of being underwhelming, disappointing, going back to his time, on the big stage with the Knicks. But this is a really, really good player. He gives you block upside. He is seemingly healthy and playing, reasonable minutes now. We have him projected for 26 at 6,800. So getting, 1.3 to 1.4 fantasy points per minute on average. You expect that to go up against Washington. I'd like getting to him as a very high upside mid-range play here. He is the priority for me at the moment of the Jalen Johnson, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Porzingis group of guys. Then we move to like that mid-tier in terms of ownership, where you have Dyson Daniels getting around 20%. You have Scherer getting around 10 to 15%. I don't have much Daniels here at 7,300. I think this is probably also just another sort of casualty of looking to pay up for Luka, because it's clearly a good spot for Daniels. He's somebody that can really benefit from the extra possessions as well, because he does rack up defensive stats. Guys like this are really nice in tournaments because you can get fantasy points without them having to cut into anyone else's production. If when you talk about players that don't get a lot of defensive stats, like if we just pretend for a second that Dyson Daniels is somebody that is just a secondary scorer, secondary facilitator for the Hawks, but he's not doing a lot defensively, then for him to have a really big fantasy game, you need him probably to cut into some of Jalen Johnson's scoring or Kristaps Porzingis scoring or Jalen Johnson's facilitating. And obviously that's not going to happen all that often, but because of the defensive upside that Dyson Daniels gives you, in addition to his ability to do some stuff on the offensive end, only a 15% usage rate, but he does have a 21% assist percentage. He has a 10% rebounding percentage, but he can get those defensive stats and he's contributing fantasy points without doing anything that actually goes directly towards the Hawks team total. And then also there is a lot of volatility with defensive stats, which is nice in large field tournaments as well. So all of that said, all of those reasons that maybe you would like Dyson Daniels, I only have like 3% right now at 7,300, but he is someone where if I were to start getting less Luka, I do think I probably start getting a bit more Dyson Daniels. I have a really big stand on Scherer right now, which I don't like, but I do like. I don't like it in the sense that it's Zachary Scherer playing like 23 minutes. We haven't seen him consistently closing games. In their last game, even without Luke Kennard, you had Vit Krejci close that game over Scherer. Scherer played 21 and a half minutes. So I don't feel great about that, obviously. We only have him projected for 23 minutes, 19 and a half fantasy points here. What I do like, though, is that he's not getting much ownership. He is cheap. And he's playing the Wizards. Like, this is somebody that can potentially really thrive in a game where he's able, like, he's playing a sloppy team. The Wizards will turn the ball over. He can get some defensive stats. He can get out in transition, get some easy baskets that way. There's just so many ways that Scherer can make the most of 21, 22, 23 minutes in this spot, only projected for around 11 or 12% ownership right now. And he does help me get to somebody like Luka. So, again, I think if I end up building around Jalen Johnson more, I'm probably able to get more of Dyson Daniels and Nickeil Alexander-Walker than I have right now. And as a result, I can get to a little bit less Scherer. Whereas if I do continue to build around Luka and prioritize getting over the field on Luka, using somebody like Scherer does make sense in that there is volatility there. He's not the sexiest guy to get to. You're not going to feel great when you just look at a bunch of lineups that have Zachary Scherer, but at sub 5K, there is a ceiling for him. Like, he can play his way into additional minutes if he's playing well. He does have, obviously, the potential to play well against the Wizards, because you or I would have the potential to play well against the Wizards. And he's not a bad fantasy point per minute guy on average either. 0.86 DraftKings points per minute for the season. 20% usage rate is respectable. So he's not somebody where, you're saying I'm concerned about the minutes and I also need this like 0.6 fantasy point per minute guy to go get a fantasy point per minute. Scherer is a solid point per minute guy. He probably will be closer to, 0.9 to 1 fantasy points per minute against the Wizards on average. And so really you're just hoping he plays his way into more minutes. And those things are correlated. Like if he is producing fantasy points at a really high rate, obviously not that the Hawks are making their decisions based on fantasy points, but generally if you're scoring a lot of fantasy points, you're probably playing pretty well. It does become more likely that he's able to get more minutes also. So again, not a stand that you're going to feel real comfortable with, but on a 3-game slate, if the uncomfortable stand I'm taking is the former first overall pick, I'm sure I'll make worse plays between now and the end of the season on some of these short slates. Luke Kennard right now, have him projected in. He's only 3,500, only projected for around 7% ownership right now. I have 17% there. He's another cheap guy that just, can get hot, should get plenty of open looks against the Wizards, assuming that he does play. Right now, we have him projected for 17.5 minutes, 13.5 DraftKings points. Clearly not somebody that you would really be considering at all on a full slate, but capable of getting hot against the Wizards, likely to play, 15 to 20 minutes. So I don't mind getting into some of him. Okongwu's getting 5% ownership. I'm right around the field there at $7,200. I have 7%. And then Vit Krejci, 4,900, getting 4%. I have 5%. So for the Hawks, again, kind of to recap, I think they are the most appealing team on the slate, top to bottom. They're playing the Wizards. They have good, fantasy producers. From an ownership standpoint, Johnson, Alexander Walker, Porzingis are the guys that will be rostered the most. For me personally right now, which obviously all this shit can change between now and lock. For me right now, Porzingis is the biggest priority of those three. I'm around the third of the field on Johnson, around half the field on Alexander Walker. But again, none of that is like, for some reason, think Jalen Johnson's not going to destroy the Wizards. Like, he probably is. It's just he happens to not be in a ton of my lineups. I know that I'm over the field on Luka. I'm probably over the field on some other pay-up guys as well. Dyson Daniels, solid mid-range play if you can afford him. And then Risa Shea standing out for me right now as the guy that I'm taking the biggest stand on relative to the field, which, again, it's not so much I love Risa Shea, even though I do like the matchup for him against the Wizards. I like the matchup for everybody. It's more so just he fits really nicely into lineups that I'm playing. And, oh, by the way, he does have volatility, and he's not super popular. On the Wizards side here, as I mentioned before, Keyshawn George is questionable. That matters a lot. Marvin Bagley is questionable. That matters less. Vukcevic is 3,400. So if Bagley is out, you can potentially look to him. He probably plays somewhere around 18 to 20 minutes if Bagley misses this game. But for right now, we have Bagley and Keyshawn George both projected in. Looking at ownership, you have basically the entire team getting like 20 to 30% ownership on DraftKings. And for the most part, I think that that's fine. This is the most appealing game. I mentioned it before, but even for the Wizards, they have a higher team total, slightly at least, than the Sixers and the Clippers, the two other underdogs on the slate. This game, you have, the Hawks playing at the 11th fastest pace this year. You have the Wizards playing at the 4th fastest pace. The Hawks are a much better defensive team, obviously. But starting with Chris Middleton, he's getting about 28% ownership along with Keyshawn George. Middleton coming in at a $4,400 price tag, projected to play about 25 minutes. I have 20%. He's fine. You're not super excited about Chris Middleton, but he does have only power forward eligibility, which is weird. That is actually like the last thing I expected to see. I almost just out of habit said shooting guard, small forward eligibility, but Chris Middleton is power forward only. So that does lower actually the amount of interest that you should have in him at least a little bit, but he is still $4,400. So far this season, Middleton has played 11 games. He's averaging 0.79 DraftKings points per minute, only a 17% usage rate, does have a 14% assist percentage, which is respectable. You're not seeing like Chris Middleton go out there and take over games like you could, given the supporting cast around him. He's very clearly out there as a veteran, deferring to some of these other younger guys. We've seen Alex Sarr take a big step in terms of usage, but at 4,400, Middleton is pretty much correctly priced. Keyshawn George getting 28% ownership as well. I do have 33% of him right now, so right around the field, a little bit higher if he does play. He's been very productive so far this season through 14 games, 1.1 DraftKings points per minute is second best of any of the starters behind Alex Sarr, or any of the main rotation players, period, behind Alex Sarr. He has a 22% usage rate, 23% assist percentage, 10% rebounding percentage. He's doing everything for the Wizards. He has been, as bad as the Wizards are coming into this game with, I think, like a 1-15 record, we have seen some positive development from some of their first overall picks, Keyshawn George being one of them, Alex Sarr being another. So he has been a productive fantasy option. He is projected to play low 30s in minutes, so perfectly fine getting the Keyshawn George here with shooting guard eligibility. One spot that is getting ownership that I'm not getting to, even though he's cheap, is Justin Champagnie. Right now projected for like 24-25% ownership. I only have about 4% of him at 3,200. I assume that I will get to more if Keyshawn George is out. But if Keyshawn George is in, I think Champagnie's a little bit scary, especially at the high ownership. Like if you take some ownership away from him, then by all means, get to some Justin Champagnie. He probably, like I said, should be in the rotation with Trey Johnson out. My expectation is that essentially Trey Johnson's like 17, 18, 19 minutes go to Champagnie. But I am a little concerned because Champagnie has been behind Cam Whitmore in the rotation generally. Now, we did see Champagnie play more in that last game, but from a development standpoint, the Wizards should be a lot more interested to figure out if they got anything in Cam Whitmore than in Justin Champagnie, who has basically proven that he's a competent ninth guy, eighth guy off the bench in the NBA, but he's not somebody that has any chance of being part of the next good Wizards team. Whereas like Cam Whitmore actually could. They got him from Houston for nothing. He seemingly talked his way out of Houston more than anything. And Houston's a team that certainly has more young talent than the Wizards do. If Cam Whitmore can actually live up to some of the hype that he had coming into the draft, that would be a huge boon for the Wizards. And so they should theoretically want to see that. So Champagnie's just kind of the perfect type of guy where if the field's going to play a lot of him, I can find other Justin Champagnies even on a 3-game slate. If they're not going to play him, then yeah, roll the dice, hope that for whatever reason he plays a few more minutes, even though Middleton's back and somehow has a good game. But if that ownership holds, 20 to 30%, I think I can find other spots to get to. Whitmore also getting about 25% ownership at 3,800. I do have 25% of him. He's a solid point per minute guy. I do think that his playing time is a bit more stable for all the reasons that I just said. 0.97 DraftKings points per minute this year. He has a 23% usage rate. He actually has the third highest usage rate on the team behind Alex Sarr and CJ McCollum amongst the regulars. As he plays more minutes, in theory, that comes down a little bit, the more minutes that you're not playing with the second unit, but it's not like we're expecting him to go play 30 minutes and play a ton of minutes alongside Middleton, McCollum, Sarr, anything like that. Middleton, I guess, probably doesn't even really matter, but Sarr and McCollum, you're still mostly getting bench minutes for Whitmore. So he is a good point per minute guy. Champagnie's been solid this year as well. 134 minutes played, 0.9 fantasy points per minute. So a little bit behind Whitmore and probably comes down a bit over a larger sample. But I do prefer getting to Whitmore for the extra $600. Alex Sarr, 25% ownership. I have 29%. He is center only on DraftKings, which does suck. But, again, 3-game slate. So not as important as if it were a larger slate. He's been very, very good from a fantasy standpoint. 1.4 DraftKings points per minute. To put that in context, and just talking for the full season, not just the games that Trae Young's been out, Jalen Johnson's at 1.44 DraftKings points per minute this season. Alex Sarr coming in at 1.4, 27% usage rate, 22% assist percentage, 15% rebounding percentage. He's blocking shots at a high rate, 6% block rate. So far this season, he's been very, very productive from a fantasy standpoint. The only thing really holding him back is that he is center only, but he does look good here. He's somebody I want to get to. I have 19% McCollum at 5,900, looks fine. 13% Carrington at 3,300 as, a backup that is, another guy likely to play low to mid 20s here. We have him projected for 24 minutes right now. I don't mind that. In the last game, for the Wizards, again, the one where Middleton was out, Carrington came off the bench. He played 24 minutes. If we look at recent games for Carrington, he has played 24, 16, 17, 20. So our minute projection might come down a little bit on him. He's somebody that I do think would benefit if Keyshawn George is out. But if George is in, Middleton's back, that 24 minutes might be a little bit hot. But either way, he's only $3,300. So getting to him in order to pay up for Jalen Johnson or Luka or whoever is still going to make some sense. But I do think, certainly would benefit if Keyshawn George misses this game. Bilal Coulibaly, 5K, 19% ownership. I'm getting to 11% there. Very disappointing last game, or at least the last time that I rostered him. But overall this season, another guy coming in at 0.92 DraftKings points per minute through 7 games. And someone else that kind of can just do a little bit of everything. Not a super high usage guy, but 19% usage rate isn't nothing. 17% assist percentage is respectable. He gets blocks, he gets steals. So I think, another just kind of secondary play that looks fine. So you don't have anywhere near the same level of priorities on the Wizards that you do on the Hawks. But like top to bottom, I think you actually have more guys with like 20% ownership on the Wizards than Atlanta. You just don't have anybody probably getting over 30%. Very, very useful game to get to. Moving on to Orlando, taking on the Sixers. We just got the 4:30 injury report, so I will pull that up. For Orlando, Goga Bitadze is questionable. Paolo Banchero is out. Franz Wagner is available. Wendell Carter is not on the injury report. So we don't have to worry too much about Goga anyway. Fuck that guy. Screwed half of my lineups, half of the field lineups the other day. But assuming we don't get any late news with Carter, we shouldn't have to worry about that. Let me refresh this, see if maybe this banner thing got fixed. It didn't. Okay, so need to find Orlando here. All right, everything looks good in the projections for Orlando. It's just not showing up in the header at the top for whatever reason. Jalen Suggs getting the bulk of the ownership from the Magic here, and I think that makes sense. With no Banchero, we have seen Suggs step up, take on a bigger role, produce a lot of fantasy points. He's still only $6,500, so that looks good as well. Overall, for the season, including the games that Banchero was in, Suggs is coming in at 1.24 DraftKings points per minute. So he's been productive, overall through 13 games. You have a 23.5% usage rate, 27% assist percentage, rebounds at a respectable clip for a guard as well. Happy to get to him. I have 35%, Fields at 38, no problems there. Anthony Black coming off the bench at 5,100, still playing, reasonable minutes, even in the games that Jalen Suggs is in. We have him projected for about 27 minutes right now. Recent games, 28 minutes without Suggs, but 29 with Suggs, 29 with Suggs, 33 with Suggs. You're seeing plenty of Anthony Black, and I think that is a solid play still at 5,100. I have 16%. All of Franz Wagner, Tristan da Silva, Desmond Bane, and Wendell Carter Jr. are projected between basically like 14 and 20% ownership. I think they all look like secondary plays here. 8,700 for Wagner is fine, but not a huge priority when, you can just find $1,200 somewhere and get to Jalen Johnson, who looks better. You do get a high ceiling from Franz Wagner. Obviously, with Paolo Banchero being out, that does open up the opportunities for more production. We just haven't seen it on a consistent basis yet. You do have Desmond Bane there, whereas obviously in previous seasons you didn't. You have Jalen Suggs taking on a bigger role. And so we haven't seen the consistent production from Wagner yet. But overall this season, 1.14 DraftKings points per minute through 18 games, trying to load it without Banchero on the floor. And right now it's just spinning for me. So might have that. And there it goes. 1.21 DraftKings points per minute without Banchero on the floor. Identical so far to Jalen Suggs without Banchero on the floor. Desmond Bane is at 1.05 DraftKings points per minute. So you have seen a slight uptick on average for Wagner without Banchero, but it's not the same. It's not like a massive bump that maybe you would have expected. Not to say that won't change at some point, but we haven't seen it yet. He is relatively expensive. Tristan da Silva likely playing 25 to 30 minutes. He's 5K, 17% ownership for the field and for me. I have 18% Bane. Like I said, 1.05 DraftKings points per minute. Relatively expensive at 7,700. Of the main 3 scorers for Orlando, the only one that really hasn't seen their price tag get too high is Suggs. And as a result, you're seeing close to 40% ownership for Suggs. Sean said, if you were only playing one lineup, is there anyone you would look to avoid? Remind me at the end of the show. But probably not. Like, if I think of somebody during the show, I'll try and remember to mention it. But like even Jalen Johnson, who like I'm not getting much of, I would have absolutely no interest playing him, or I would have no issue rather playing him in one lineup if that's if I built a lineup I liked and it had Jalen Johnson, like, I think he's great. It's just that I'm getting to more Luka in large field stuff. I don't think that there's one player. There has been one player so far, at least, where I look and I'm like, what the fuck is the field doing? Why would they play that guy? That's crazy. Champagny probably the closest, but even that, like, I get it. It's just I don't really want 25% on Justin Champagny. But when I can play like Whitmore or Carrington for the same price. But even that, it's not like it was a bad play. For the most part, I would focus a lot more on like who I want in my lineup as opposed to who I don't want. But if there is somebody that stands out as far as like I just don't get it, I will try and remember to point that out. Philadelphia on the other side here, lots of ownership coming into Justin Edwards at 4,400. He started Philadelphia's last game. He played a lot of minutes, I think 32 minutes in that one. 32 and a half minutes in that one. Now, there is volatility in Justin Edwards' playing time. He does not have to close the game. He does not have to play 32 minutes. Where is Philly? There they are. Does not have to play 32 minutes. We have him projected to play 32. But again, there is volatility there. Like you could get Dominic Barlow playing more. You could get McCain playing more. You could just get different rotations in general. But he is likely to play around 32 minutes. You do not have VJ Edgecombe today. You do not have Paul George. You do not have Joel Embiid. And you don't have Kelly Oubre. So like the minutes are safer than in the game where you had George last game. But you didn't have Edgecombe in that one. You didn't have Oubre in that one, and Paul George played 20 minutes. So you do have those extra 20 minutes from George. It does make it safer to play Edwards. It does make it more likely that Edwards gets those minutes. But again, there are still different ways this can go, whether it's McCain playing more, Watford playing more, Barlow playing more, them just, running different lineups out there. But obviously, all of those guys missing does make Edwards relatively safe to get to. And I am getting to him as one of my primary value plays as well. He's in 55% of my lineups. He's in around 50% of the Fields lineups right now. And I'm fine just kind of eating that chalk. Again, if you wanted to turn him into some other guys, it's not like he's the hands down like safest guy in the world. Like you're not going to be shocked if Justin Edwards just doesn't get there. But, we have him projected for 22 DraftKings points. You can find that elsewhere also. But 0.75 to 0.8 fantasy point per minute guy, not a good matchup. Orlando is a good defensive team, but it is just likely that the minutes are there, and he just fits nicely into the lineups. Small forward eligibility is always valuable when you're talking about cheap guys, just because it's not the sexiest or easiest position to fill out. So I think that's fine. Trendon Watford, 4,500, getting plenty of ownership of his own, 36%. I have 33%. This Philadelphia team just looks like a team that we're going to be going to for value. And again, it's not that you're getting to guys that you feel great getting to. You're not going to be shocked if Dominic Barlow kills your lineups, or Trendon Watford kills your lineups, or Justin Edwards kills your lineups. Like none of these guys are great, consistent NBA players, but you do on a 3-game slate have a Philadelphia team missing 4 of its main players. And that obviously just opens up minutes for you, even though it's not, an ideal matchup. Still a 112 team total for Philadelphia as well. And you really only have like 1.5 high usage guys, or I guess 2 high usage guys here. Like Tyrese Maxey, obviously high usage guy. And then if you call Jared McCain a half because he's not playing a ton of minutes, and you call Andre Drummond a half, like I guess you could throw Quentin Grimes in there, maybe call it like 2.5 total people. It's a team where there is some extra usage available, is my point. You don't have like 2 or 3 clear alpha scorers, and you're definitely getting like empty minutes from the Edwards type guys. So it is a team that I'm looking to for value here. Watford's in a third of my lineups. Andre Drummond getting 32% ownership at 6,500. He's in 45% of my lineups right now. Just a good point per minute guy, always has been. He's somebody whose role in the NBA has varied greatly from year to year, but it's never been because of his lack of ability to rebound and put the ball in the basket and do things that get you fantasy points. It's been because of his lack of ability to play defense and play in modern NBA systems. When he's out there, the guy produces. He played 38 minutes last game, only 18 the game before that, but that was a game where they were a lot healthier. You had VJ Edgecombe. I don't remember if he fouled out of that game. I don't remember what the deal was, but in his last 5 games, 38, 18, 34, 38, and 36 minutes. He's playing big minutes. The salary has come up a bit, but it's justified. 1.08 DraftKings points per minute for Drummond this year is actually a bit lower than you typically expect for Drummond, but it's obviously still good for that price tag on a 3-game slate, playing mid-30s in minutes. Quentin Grimes only getting 23% ownership at 6,100. I like getting to him despite the tough matchup. He's in 32% of my lineups right now. He is somebody that, we saw it a lot last year. He can step up and take on a bigger role when he needs to offensively. He's not somebody that the offense is going to run through when they're healthy, especially because Tyrese Maxey is just such a ball-dominant guard. 31% usage rate for Maxey. But then you put Embiid on the floor, and there's just no other shots to go around. But even, Paul George is a high usage guy. VJ Edgecombe has a 20% usage rate this year. Kelly Oubre is at 19%. But you take all these guys out and you look at what's replacing them. You're replacing those, 18 to 20% usage rates. Trendon Watford, 16%. Justin Edwards, 16%. Dominic Barlow, 12%. Even Jared McCain this year, only 62 minutes played, but he's only at 18%. So he hasn't actually gone out there and taken on the higher usage role like we saw at times last year. So there is plenty of room here for Quentin Grimes to step up. With all of these guys out, I don't think we're going to have much of a sample size, but I'm double checking anyway, just to see what it looks like this year with no Oubre, George, or Embiid on the floor. Again, we're 15 games into the season, so I doubt we're going to have too much here, even though Embiid hasn't played much. But Grimes is certainly one of these guys that can just go out there, step up, just like Jared McCain can. I think there is volatility in the production because the Sixers need somebody to, or maybe they don't. Maybe Maxey can just do it all on his own, but they probably would like someone to step up alongside of Tyrese Maxey. I need to take Edgecombe off the floor as well. 193 minutes with no Oubre, George, or Embiid, 21.5% usage rate, 1 fantasy point per minute for Grimes. If we take Edgecombe off, I assume the sample size is about to absolutely plummet. But that's taking, in those minutes, Edgecombe has a 23% usage rate. So there does become a lot available. Only 54 minutes for Grimes without any of those guys on the floor. He only has a 16% usage rate. But again, 54 minutes. McCain's played 17. So we can't really read too much into that. This is a spot where you kind of just know who the players are and know that the most likely guys to step up into more usage are Grimes, McCain when they're on the floor. And then obviously like Drummond can take on a bit more, but he's not playmaking. And Tyrese Maxey is going to get everything that he can. DeWitt said, is Orlando still a tough matchup? Do we need to adjust our priors? I don't know what you're referring to, like just Banchero or what. They've been one of the most efficient defenses in the league still so far this season. 4th in adjusted defensive rating on dunks and threes, 19th in pace. So I don't know if you're just referring to because of Banchero, but overall Orlando's still been an unappealing matchup. And the Sixers have the 2nd lowest team total. Only the Clippers are a point behind them. So I do like the Sixers for value here. I'm getting to a lot of the Sixers despite the matchup. Maxey getting 18% ownership at 10K. He is certainly somebody that you could use as a Jalen Johnson pivot. He's going to play a ton of minutes. The guy barely leaves the floor. We have him projected to play 39 minutes. He's going to have the ball in his hands a ton for the season. He's got like a 31% usage rate. Need to put these guys back on the floor just to get a real sample size for Maxey. But he's been great. Like he is somebody where you can say, look, I know Jalen Johnson projects a couple of points better. He's like $100 less expensive, but he's going to be twice as popular. I want to play more Tyrese Maxey. That would be perfectly fine. 1.4 DraftKings points per minute for Maxey this year overall. The biggest difference is just that he doesn't get to play the Wizards. He's playing the Magic instead, but still very, very capable of putting up a big game. I only have 11% right now, though. I do have 19% of Jared McCain, $3,800, only projected for around 10% ownership right now. He's really interesting to me. Obviously, got hurt about halfway through last year, maybe even before halfway. I don't remember. Was playing really, really well and then got hurt. And then now he's back. They have been ramping him up a bit. He played 5 minutes his first game back, 14, 13, played 26 last game, We have him projected for 23 minutes right now. But one thing I really, really like from the last game that makes me think maybe there is some minutes volatility working in his favor here with everybody out is that he got to 25.7 minutes last game, which that by itself is good. Like if he plays 26 minutes today, I definitely would want a good amount of Jared McCain. But if you look at his actual rotations in the last game, he played in the first half. He played like a 7.5 minute rotation, subbed in late in the first quarter, played into the second quarter, and then left the floor. And then he closed the first half. He played a 2 minute and 52-second stint. So nothing really to take away from that other than he played like normal minutes for a backup. What I thought was interesting was that he subs in as along with Paul George. Paul George didn't start the second half last game. So he subs in alongside Paul George early in the second quarter, like 3 minutes and 15 seconds, give or take, into the second quarter. He then plays the entire rest of the first quarter, and then he plays the first 4 minutes and 21 seconds of the fourth quarter. So you get a stint of like 12 straight minutes from Jared McCain. That's not something you do when you're worried about somebody's health. That is like as long a stint as anybody gets outside of Tyrese Maxey and like Cade Cunningham in November in the NBA. So they played that like 12-minute stint, and then they actually brought him in. He was going to close. They brought him in the closing lineup, and then they left him in for garbage time. Again, not something that you do if you're worried about somebody's health or minutes or like a strict minutes cap or anything like that. I've said it on shows in the past. One of my favorite things to see when you have somebody ramping up, coming back from injury, is them get garbage time, because that is the team like clearly looking to just get them more conditioning, get them more time on the floor in an NBA game. And it wasn't a lot of garbage time. It was like a minute and 10 seconds, but they left him out there when they didn't need to. So the combination of leaving him out there, and then to me, the bigger thing was just letting him go play 12 straight minutes at one time. Like obviously you had the quarter, the quarter ended. So you got a 30 or 45-second break, whatever that is. But he played 12 straight minutes of game time, give or take. That is really, really good to see. And then now you get this game where we don't know exactly what the rotation is going to look like with no George and Edgecombe and Oubre and Embiid. They need somebody to step up and take minutes. They need somebody to step up and score the ball. Jared McCain's capable of doing both of those things as long as, his health and conditioning cooperates. So I am very interested, especially at modest ownership, in a sub 4K Jared McCain here. I like that play quite a bit. He's somebody that I think, going back to that single entry point before as well, perfect guy to use to differentiate. If you assume in single entry, you're going to have people sticking even more to median projections, and you're not to take anything away, but like your Cam Whitmore at 3,800, your Bub Carrington at 3,300, your Champagny at 3,200, those guys maybe get even more ownership, and you see your opponents going to them a little bit more than Jared McCain. Perfect guy, I think, to use to differentiate lineups really in any format. I will be interested to see kind of where ownership ends up on him. He is somebody that, I don't know that anybody's even done shows yet today. I don't know what they'll talk about. Maybe everybody's going to say the same shit that I'm saying right now, and he's going to get pushed up a bit. But definitely interested in Jared McCain. Think he's got a bit more minutes upside here than maybe people would assume. And then wrapping things up here with the two teams in LA, both undefeated. Game matters big time for both of them. And that is something, with it being an NBA Cup game, you can look to. I mentioned it with the Wizards and Hawks, where you shouldn't really be too worried about the Hawks, probably, even if they were to just destroy the Wizards, which the game is in Washington. It is, a 9 or a 10-point spread. It's not like it's anything crazy, but they probably are going to leave their guys in for a while anyway. Here, you're not expecting a blowout, probably, it's like a 7-point spread, but either way, you're probably getting guys left in. You're going to get, I would assume, these teams taking the game seriously. They both certainly would want to win. And I'm getting to a lot of this game, which I really, really like, because there are good players to get here, and there is modest ownership coming in to them. Starting on the Clippers side, from an injury standpoint, we do have a Q tag on Bogdanovich. No Derek Jones Jr., obviously no Bradley Beal. He's out for the year. Bogdanovich's status, does matter as far as just opening up some minutes for the wings, potentially. He did not play in the last game. it was a 15-point loss to the Cavs. You got 17 minutes from Chris Paul. You got 25 from Nick Batum. You got 24 from Chris Dunn. John Collins played 30. Kobe Sanders came off the bench, still played 28. Benefited a little bit because Kawhi Leonard went to the locker room early, if I remember correctly. But, Bogdanovic, not somebody that's going to have necessarily like a direct, huge one-to-one impact anywhere. Projected for 23 minutes, not a super high usage guy. He's not like going to be the team leader in any one category. But if he's out, it does just, marginally bump Batum, Sanders, Dunn, Chris Paul at 3K flat potentially as well. So that is one to keep an eye on. Not somebody that is just going to create like a slam dunk play anywhere, but it will make his teammates marginally better if he is out. Starting here, though, not a ton of ownership coming into anything. 15 to 20% projected to James Harden, John Collins, and Ivica Zubac. I am over the field right now on Harden. I am over the field on Collins. I'm actually a bit under the field on $7,900 Zubac. I love Zubac in general. He's somebody that I do really like to play, but just not having an easy time getting to him right now on this particular slate. I think that, if you can, like, 15% ownership for somebody that is as good a point per minute guy as him. There's nothing wrong with him as a tournament play. He's just not one that I'm really getting to, but I am getting to $9,800 Harden. I think, again, just somebody that I'm using as a Jalen Johnson pivot. You have Johnson projected for nearly double the ownership of James Harden. Again, Jalen Johnson gets to face the Wizards. He should be the highest owned guy out of Harden, Luka, LeBron, himself. I agree. Like, he should be the highest owned guy, but that does open the opportunity to still get really good high upside guys at not as much ownership on a 3-game slate. It's always nice when my stands on 3-game slates, other than, Risa Shea, who obviously is not in this category, but if I can take stands on 3-game slates that involve like real NBA players, actual like NBA stars, that is preferable to those 3-game slates where like your stands are just jamming in random 7th guys off the bench at 3,200 and hoping to get really lucky. So I have no issues, taking stands on Harden and Luka, even though obviously you'd rather they be playing the Wizards. 1.45 DraftKings points per minute for Harden this year. Basically the same as Jalen Johnson's overall production. Again, not accounting for Trae Young. Harden's playing huge minutes. This game matters. So all of that looks nice as well. Getting to 33% of him. John Collins, power forward and center eligible. That power forward eligibility is really nice. We've talked about Porzingis being only a center, and that's probably what's costing me some Zubats. Sarr, only a center, which is correct, but with how flexible DraftKings has been with multi-position eligibility at times in the past, you've seen Sarr power forward. I think he is a power forward on FanDuel, or at least he was at some point recently. But it does make it, tougher to get to guys like Zubats. It also makes that power forward eligibility on somebody like John Collins a bit more valuable because you can't use that spot on Porzingis or on Sarr or, guys like that. So John Collins getting 15% ownership. I have 23% right now. For the season, he has struggled, only 0.8 fantasy points per minute. That is keeping the ownership and the salary in check, though. So, it's one of those things. You can look at it either way. Like, oh, I don't want to play John Collins because he's played like ass this year. It's a reasonable argument. Or you can say, John Collins has been in the NBA a while. We generally know what we're getting. Obviously, he's in a different role here, a different situation where, at times he was the number one option for the Hawks. Now he's playing with Harden. He's playing with Kawhi. He's losing rebounds to Zubats. We know that we prefer John Collins as a center. That is not, what we're getting. But he is still cheap. He is still playing minutes. I would like if we saw it a little bit actually last game. You got a little bit of John Collins without Zubats on the floor. Not a direct. I wish they would just like stagger them from a fantasy standpoint. We didn't see that, but we did see a couple of minutes of Collins out there with no Zubats. So if you can get those, those should be good for him. But there's no denying this is a much different role for John Collins than he had in Atlanta. And it is one that should hurt his fantasy production on a per minute basis because he's going to lose out on usage to Harden and Kawhi. He's going to lose out on rebounding opportunities to Zubats. Although, he played plenty of minutes in Atlanta where he was playing alongside Capella, et cetera, a real center. But yeah, like you expect the fantasy production to come down, but still, if he's going to play around 30 minutes at 5,200, there is clearly a path to him just having a solid game, even at 0.8 fantasy points per minute. If he pushes 30 minutes on a 3-game slate, he's not projecting all that poorly for his salary. You can see here that we have him projected for, you cannot see here because I'm not showing it on the screen. We have him projected for 27 minutes, only 21 fantasy points, and that still got him into 23% of my lineups. So I've mentioned this on shows before. I always like it. If I'm over the field and if I'm over the field on a player and then I look at the projection that I used for him, and my immediate thought is not that it's wrong, but that if I had to guess if it's too low or too high, I would absolutely be guessing too low. And I'm still over the field, that makes me more confident that, not that he's going to perform well, obviously, it has nothing to do with that, but that, I'm not making some like crazy assumption that he's going to actually be a 1.2 fantasy point per minute guy, and that's why I should play him or something. If I'm looking and I'm like, yeah, actually projected this guy to play like shit tonight, but still showing up in lineups, that just makes me feel at least a little bit better about the play, and that's what we're getting with John Collins here. Certainly not over projecting him at 21 fantasy points in 27 minutes. Nobody else getting much ownership here. Sub 10% coming in to Chris Dunn, Kobe Sanders, Nick Batum, Chris Paul, Kawhi getting 1% at 8,400. I'm getting the 8% Kobe Sanders at 4,100. I really have nothing to say there other than like he's cheap and 5% owned or whatever. He'll be out on the floor running around doing nothing. He has a 16% usage rate this year, 0.61 DraftKings points per minute. I really have like no analysis for Kobe Sanders other than 3-game slate, and he's cheap. Chris Paul is 3K flat. I do think he probably plays a little bit more if Bogdanovich is out. If you really just like hate yourself, hate money, want to go that route. 17, 23, 23 minutes in his last 3 games. Bogdanovich missed 2 of those games. Kawhi was out in the other one. So you probably do need Bogdanovich to be out to have any interest in Chris Paul. We only have him projected for about 10 minutes or 11 minutes right now, if we assume that Bogdanovich is back and in. I'm not getting to any Kawhi. Like, if you're getting there, you're just making it's Kawhi Leonard argument, but it's hard to project him for more than like 26, 27 minutes, I think, and makes it tough to get there at 8,400. That's $300 less than Franz Wagner, who could conceivably play like 12 minutes more or something like that. On the other side for the Lakers, you do have LeBron back, which obviously cuts into what we expect from Luka on an average basis, but it has nothing to do with Luka's ceiling. LeBron can be in, LeBron can be out, and Luka can just go have a Luka game where he scores 100 fantasy points or 80 fantasy points or whatever. Obviously, when LeBron is in, the chances of that come down because LeBron is still going to have the ball in his hands a lot, et cetera, et cetera. But like Luka's ceiling is still massive with or without LeBron. His median projection just comes down, and his chances of hitting that ceiling come down. But you're still getting massive minutes from Luka. 40, 34, 38, and 40 in his last 4. He's averaged 37 minutes per game over his last 5. The last 2 games were the ones with LeBron in, where he has played 30 and 34 minutes. I like getting to Luka as long as the ownership, remains relatively low. Right now, projected for like 20% ownership. I am a little shy of 2x that at 35% of my lineups. He's expensive. He's probably a bit overpriced for LeBron being back, but overall this season, still at 1.75 DraftKings points per minute. You do assume, and I'm double checking this before I say it, but assume that they will stagger LeBron and Luka's minutes. Wanted to double check that because I assume JJ Redick is smart enough to figure that out, but some NBA coaches probably would not be. But yeah, every minute that LeBron was not on the floor last game, Luka was, and vice versa. Luka has played 45 minutes next to LeBron through those 2 games, still 1.41 DraftKings points per minute, and probably does have room to improve on that. And if LeBron's going to play, let's call it 32 minutes, that means you're getting 16 minutes from Luka with no LeBron. And if we're going to say, let's say, what do we have Luka projected for? 37 minutes. So 40% roughly of Luka's minutes would be without LeBron, where he's, like a 1.8 fantasy point per minute guy. Looks really, he still looks really good, obviously. Like, he's still the highest projected guy on the slate. He just projects lower than he would if LeBron were out. So yeah, I like getting to Luka here quite a bit. Tim said, are we giving starters an extra minute or two because of the NBA Cup? It looks, in our projections, it looks like we're pretty close to like averages, but I think that you could definitely, if you wanted to, bump, add an extra minute to like somebody like Luka for sure. LeBron is a little bit more, obviously they're weighing, different things with LeBron. Like, LeBron's health is certainly more important to them than whether or not they win their pool in round one of the NBA Cup. But somebody like Luka, I think if you wanted to take him from 37 to like 38 and a half, certainly could do that, and would make him look even better. I would say make sure you're being consistent, because every team today has at least something to play for. None of these teams are eliminated yet. There are ones like Philadelphia and I think Washington that if they lose, they are eliminated. And like, obviously different teams have different motivations. I'm sure Washington is not under the illusion that like, if they just can beat Atlanta, they're going to make a run in the NBA Cup. But like, Atlanta, I'm sure wants to win this game. The Lakers and Clippers, I'm sure want to win this game, again, with the caveat that I don't think they're going to try and kill LeBron to do it. But like, that is one reason that I like the Lakers game in general. Like, you have Harden, you have Luka. Those are two guys that can go play 40 minutes. And it wouldn't be shocking. And if this game just does go down to the wire, I think you could see that. So I like that. Austin Reeves is certainly somebody that you could add an extra minute or two to if you wanted to as well. I'm already getting a little bit over the field on him. 8,100, 16% ownership. I have 21%. Reeves is just another example. Same boat as Luka, obviously to a lesser extent. He's not Luka, but you had LeBron miss all but 2 games this year. So salaries increase on Luka, on Reeves, on guys like that. And then they're slow to come back down once LeBron rejoins the team. So as a result, you're kind of overpaying to be contrarian, but you're not like overpaying in a bad way. You're not paying some crazy salary for a guy that was starting and then now he's playing 15 minutes. You're paying, $500 more than you should for their median projection for guys that can still just go absolutely nuts. Austin Reeves, again, not the same category as Luka, but he's also $4,000 less. We know Austin Reeves can go have ridiculous games. He's played 55 minutes alongside LeBron so far, only 0.88 DraftKings points per minute. Obviously you do expect him to take a bigger hit than Luka, because Austin Reeves now will always be on the floor with at least one of Luka or LeBron, because they're going to play no minutes where neither Luka or LeBron are on the floor, barring injury, foul trouble, whatever. So Reeves is always going to be with at least one of them, and then he's going to play a chunk of minutes with both of them. Whereas when LeBron was out, you were getting some Austin Reeves minutes with no Luka that were obviously just massive. So he does take a bigger hit in that regard, because Luka is going to be the alpha when it's Luka and Reeves on the floor. But he's still somebody that can just have a big game. Like, he's still a good player, not getting a lot of ownership. So I am getting 21% there. I have 20% of LeBron at 9K, 34 minutes last game. We have him projected for 32 and a half, 33. I think that's very, very reasonable. I don't mind being slightly ahead of the field on LeBron. Beyond that, no ownership really coming in to the Lakers. 6% coming into Jackson Hayes. I have 6%. He's 4,400. He's center only. Obviously, I think Kristaps Porzingis is a bigger priority. Obviously, I think Alex Sarr is a bigger priority. Completely different price tiers, but like, I'd rather get to Zubats. Drummond is a priority for me at center. You have Wendell Carter as a reasonably priced center if you need one. So like, Hayes is clearly not going to pop as any sort of a priority. And ideally, I'm finding value on the wings. And that's one reason that like the Sixers were showing up so much. You had Edwards as a value forward, Barlow as a value forward, Watford as a value forward. With the Wizards, Whitmore as either a shooting guard or a forward. I don't remember what he is, but one of the two. Champagny, I think is a forward. So like, I do think that from an optimal roster construction standpoint, you're probably looking to save money at like shooting guard, small forward, power forward, as opposed to center or point guard, because point guard, you have Harden, you have Luka Johnson, you have Jalen Johnson, at the forward spot, you have LeBron, but he's not the same level of priority. So I think that, all that's hurting Jackson Hayes. If for some reason Jackson Hayes was power forward eligible, he'd look really good. Like, he's projected for 24 fantasy points almost at 4,400. That's a good point per dollar play. The thing that is keeping his ownership in check and also keeping, my 6% exposure to him in check is that the opportunity cost that comes at the center position. Beyond that, I don't really have anything from the Lakers. I have 2% Rui at 2% ownership. Other than that, I don't have anything else there. So to go back to Sean's question from earlier, nobody stands out to me as like a guy that I would go into a single entry lineup thinking I'm not going to play. It's definitely a slate where I'd be going in thinking kind of in terms of like spots that I can potentially pivot, because like Jalen Johnson's ownership is going to be massive in single entry. And again, if you can find a Jalen Johnson lineup you like, he's a good play. Just be aware that he's going to be really popular. But like, that you have the Luka pivot, you have the James Harden pivot, you have the Tyrese Maxey pivot available to you for Jalen Johnson. At center, I am eating more of the more popular guys, but you have like Porzingis is getting a bunch of ownership and I'm right there. Drummond's getting a bunch and I'm right there. But you could pivot that to like a slightly more expensive Ivica Zubac at probably half to a third of the ownership, and you still have a really high ceiling, a slightly different roster construction. So it would more for me be keeping in mind like where the ownership's going to go and then what the pivot options are for you, than actively avoiding any one of those like chalk pieces, because I do think that all of the popular pieces today are good ones. I don't think this is a slate where there are some 3-game slates where you go in and you go, oh wow, this guy's going to be 60% owned because he sucks less than everybody else around him. That's not really the case today, I don't think. I think that most of the really popular pieces, like excluding, your Justin Champagne's, but like even that, he's 25%, Whitmore's 25%, Carrington's 20%. It's not like we're expecting one of them to be like 60% for some reason. Ownership's pretty flat on that group of like kind of shitty 20-minute guys, but like the guys that are going to get a lot of ownership, if I look at just total ownership for the slate, and this isn't necessarily single entry, but it'll probably be in the same direction, Justin Edwards, sure, you could turn him into somebody else. Like, there's other guys in that range, but again, they're still 20 to 30% owned. But like Jalen Suggs, I think ownership is warranted. Jalen Johnson, ownership is warranted. Alexander Walker, Porzingis, Drummond, those guys all are good plays that deserve to be, owned where they are. DeWitt said Barlow sneaky. I think he's like correct. He's getting, I think 20-ish. Yeah, around 20% ownership. I have 20%, 4,600. Like, I think he's fine. I don't think that he stands out as like super underpriced or underowned or anything like that. I'll recap now with the guys that I'm getting the most of. Again, keep in mind, and I guess let me know which is easier or better for you, like what the best plays are at a position or what I have the most of right now, because realistically, you shouldn't give a shit what I have the most of right now, because one, it's going to change relatively likely, and two, a lot of it has to do with, just how my lineups are working together, but also people always like ask that question. So whichever is easier for you, I can do, or more useful for you, I can do. But going through at point guard, actually, I guess I don't have a great way of doing this. At guard on DraftKings, my highest owned guys are Luka, Suggs, Keyshawn George, if he plays, James Harden, and Quentin Grimes. My highest owned forwards are Edwards, Risa Shea, who happens right now at least to be one of my highest owned stands on the slate, just because I think his ownership's coming in too low. So maybe it changes. But Justin Edwards, Risa Shea, Trendon Watford. I'm prioritizing paying down at forward right now. And then at center, I'm getting to a lot of Porzingis, Drummond, and Sar. Jake said, are you setting a cap on Sixers in one lineup? It's a good question. Probably not on a 3-game slate, but I can look to see what I'm even getting. So 7 of the 150 lineups I built have 4 Sixers. And then 43 have 3, 70 have 2. It doesn't look like I didn't manually set a stack. It's possible that like my model and script, kicked out some like 5-mans and stuff like that. So I guess I would not manually do it. I would take a look at the lineup that you're playing. You probably don't want like 5-6ers in a lineup. I don't have 5-6ers in any of my 150. I barely have lineups with 4. So if you were going to set a cap, I would say it's probably 3. But if you have a lineup you really like that needs a 4th 6er, it's probably playable, I guess would be my answer. So that wraps this one up. Don't forget to check out our projections, link below. They're free for now. Hit the thumbs up button, subscribe to the channel, all that stuff. Going to be doing these shows more regularly. Obviously, this week is kind of messy because of Thanksgiving and all of that. Football on Thursday is going to keep me busy and all that stuff. But in general, going to be doing the show more regularly. So do keep an eye out for that. I'll probably be moving it back to like noon. I know that's a time that had worked well for people last year. But again, with things being weird this week, 4 just worked better for me, at least today. So appreciate you checking out the show. Good luck on your lineups tonight. See you back here tomorrow afternoon.